Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on SKOR North and SKORNorth.com.
This felt like a goodbye, and it is. The Vikings have a team meeting at 9 a.m. Central, so less than an hour from now. At that point, it's likely that owners Ziggy and Mark Wilf will address players, explain their decision-making, but this is a complete teardown in terms of the brain trust of the Minnesota Vikings organization. Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman both out. A search for a new coach and general manager begins now.
Ooh, by the way, this is Mackey and Judd, daily Minnesota sports, entertainment, therapy, speculation. Don't let that fancy Tom Pelissero TV set fool you, okay? Well, his teeth are amazing. Wow. He's got TV teeth.
He's always had nice teeth, though.
Judd and I have drank a few beers on the other side of that camera there. Listen, he's wearing boxer briefs.
I was about to say, chill boys underneath.
Yeah, that's don't let Tom fool you there, okay? He's definitely wearing tube socks and a pair of chill boys underneath there. Chill boys making an appearance on Mackey and Judd this week, too.
That's right.
Chill Boys and chillboys.com. Before we get into statements about the Vikings shaking their franchise to the core, what is one word that you guys would use to describe how Chill Boys make you feel?
Redefining.
Ooh.
Because Chill Boys has redefined how I think of not just boxers, but long johns as well. I used to think of long johns as, I hope they keep me warm, but they're sort of, to call a spade, I get bunched up. I get a little bunched up. Chill Boys, nothing but comfort.
I would say relieved. Relieved is the way, because it's now completely, every time, like Judd said, there's briefs, there's boxers. Some guys are always split between the two, right? Like there's a fine line you walk. Just like Kirk haters and Kirk supporters. There's no one kind of middle in on Kirk Cousins. Either you're all in or you're all out. It's kind of like Chill Boys. But then Chill Boys comes in and says, we're going to take the bamboo and the performance brand and change your entire perception of what underwear should feel like. So I'm relieved that I now don't have to worry about which underwear I have to wear anymore. Chill Boys.
Chillboys.com, Minnesota-based company, making you feel comfortable down there. Should we do some statements here? The Vikings fired Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman this morning. You can also find a full emergency episode of Purple Daily from earlier today, too. Boys, I'm going to give you this statement out of the gate here. I'm going to lead us off here because another coach got fired. Well, a bunch of coaches are getting fired today. But my first statement is, I think the Vikings should strongly consider Brian Flores as the next head coach of the franchise. Now, I think most people are going to say two things. Well, first of all, he got fired. What happened? Why would you want a guy who just got fired? And two, he's a defensive-minded coach. Shouldn't the Vikings be going for an offensive-minded coach? The opposite of Mike Zimmer? And I would say, just based on the things that we have seen and heard about the Dolphins the last few years under Flores, and I'm even seeing reaction come out from players on social media that are just like pissed in Miami that Brian Flores was let go. When people say go the opposite of Mike Zimmer, I don't think they're thinking enough about the big picture here. It's not just going from defense to offense. It's going from a non-leader of a 53-man roster, a guy that only cared about one side of the football, to an actual leader of a team that offensive players can also connect with. And I think Brian Flores, even though the Dolphins haven't had a great offense the last few years, in a rebuild, that team has fought their ass off for him. He does come from the Belichick coaching tree. He did go 3-0 in his last 3 games against Bill Belichick, by the way. I just think there's something really intriguing about back-to-back winning seasons in Miami and the team that he has put together. And I'm very, very interested in the Vikings pursuing Brian Flores. Am I crazy?
I need to know a lot more about what transpired here. I'm inclined to agree with what you said on Purple Daily, which is I don't think the Dolphins are a super functional franchise, and so this might be more of a Dolphins problem than a Flores problem. I'd like to know what I'm guessing that the problem here revolves around Tua, and I'd like to know that story because clearly there's going to be probably a quarterback change with the Vikings as well. Would I dismiss his name? No. I think that he is, off the top of my head, the most successful coach from the Belichick tree that has come from that Patriots staff, right? Because
do we count Vrabel? Vrabel was a player.
Because he played, but he didn't coach, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, you look at Charlie Weiss, you look at that entire list, Romeo Crennel to go back that far, McDaniels. Brian Flores seems to be the one who was successful. I would certainly consider him. I would like to know more about what's transpired where the Dolphins felt that they had to fire him.
And I think my main message here would be it's less about go from defensive coach to offensive coach,
right,
or find someone who knows offensive X's and O's. Like, that would be amazing. But the number one quality you should be looking for is leadership. Someone that can set a culture, someone that can hold players accountable, but also connect with players. You need someone that players really want to die on a hill for, right? And I think defensive players would have said that about Mike Zimmer. And you're seeing some tweets out there like Chad Greenway basically said, he's the best defensive coach I've ever played for. Offensive players, not so much. So I want to know more too, but I wouldn't dismiss Brian Flores just because he's not an offensive guy. I don't think that's the most important quality.
Sure.
Okay.
Dex?
I'll go next. Yep, I'll go next here. So we talked about GM candidates on Purple Daily last weekend before the news came down, obviously, now that Spielman and Zimmer are indeed fired. But I'll throw another one into the mix here, and I would be surprised if this guy probably doesn't get a job, because just looking at the rumor mill today on Black Monday, his name is starting to pop all over the place, and we haven't even discussed him yet. John Spytek. You guys familiar with John Spytek? Of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
John Spytek sounds like a computer software.
It sounds like a
from
Bond
the early
villain.
90s or something.
It sounds like a Bond villain.
I love that.
For sure. Maybe John would need a little more sexier name to be a Bond villain, but the Spytek definitely works there. This could be someone I think that the Vikings and other teams are going to start circling as their next GM. This note from Rick Stroud, who covers the Tampa Bay Bucks for the Tampa Bay Times. He said, "I'd be shocked if the Vikings and Bears don't interview John Spytek for their GM opening. They're missing a great opportunity. He won a Super Bowl, and consider how he and his staff helped GM Jason Licht fill their roster during an injury-plagued season while winning a club record 13 games is impressive." Also, from The Athletic, Spytek is in the category of personal evaluators with vast experience on a variety of staffs. He's been in a role with the Bucs for the last 5 years, and Tampa Bay has become one of the league's best rosters. He had spent 3 years as a scout for the Broncos, and he was also the Browns' director of college scouting from 2010 to 2012. He's a former linebacker from Michigan State. But I would throw that name into there. Tampa Bay basically had a perfect roster. That's why Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay, also to get out of the cold, but Tampa Bay was ready to pop. And Brady looked at that situation and said they're one quarterback away from basically competing for a Super Bowl. Look at the Vikings, as we like to talk about, from 07-08. That entire roster was ready to pop. Sports Illustrated said, I was just going down a wormhole about the 2008 Vikings yesterday. Sports Illustrated, I forget the exact writer, said the Vikings are going to compete for a Super Bowl that season. Their roster was built out perfectly. They had T-Jack and Gus Frerotte. Brett Favre steps in 09 and leads them on a doorstep, and they should have been in the GD Super Bowl. I would look at Spytek as the next GM of the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, so you just hired him?
I hired him.
You just hired him?
Because also, here's this other fact, maybe a statement in another statement here. I told Judd about this on Saturday when the Lock and Four report came down that the firings were basically inevitable. I don't think you can dilly-dally if you're the Vikings here. I'm not trying to say ignore the hiring process, but you can't just tread water trying to find your GM. With teams now starting to interview coaches, this kind of has to be an expedited process. So you have to figure out your GM pretty damn quick. I think it's this guy. I'm pitching my wagon to Spytek in this Bond villain scenario.
So the interesting thing about that, Dex, as we talked about too, though, is I agree, and I think the Vikings have behind the scenes been doing a lot of due diligence when it comes to the potential replacement for Rick as GM. But that being said, what makes this job intriguing is now that it's opened. This is one of, if not the most attractive job. And so I don't think guys are going to race to take the Jacksonville job or a job that is open because, oh my God, I just want to take this. Mm-hmm. I think that the competition for this job and being Rick's replacement is going to be hot and heavy because you are stepping into a team that certainly has some good players. It's got what I think are considered a quality ownership group. It's got a new stadium. Like there's a lot of things to like here. And this is going to be an attractive spot if it's done right, for potential free agents as well. So I don't think you need to be like super concerned about, oh, it's a race because we've got Winter Park and the Metrodome. That's the one thing that's different now. You've got the edge, and you've got a lot of things that good candidates are going to like. And I think the eliminated thing that's so important was a lot of those candidates probably would have balked at Rick's presence. But now that that's gone, this is a blank slate of attractiveness, if that makes sense.
It's tough because like the Jaguars job, there's the Jaguars. It's a train wreck ownership group. Which is weird because Shad Khan's son Tony Khan has built up this amazing AEW wrestling company that's competing with WWE, but like on the football side, they can't get out of their own way. And they've got kind of a dumpster fire roster, and they don't really have any weapons, but they've got Trevor Lawrence. So if you think Trevor Lawrence is this 12, 15-year franchise savior quarterback, as a GM or a coach, do you view that as a more important piece and deal with the rest?
Right.
Or do you look at a franchise like the Vikings and say, there's some big question marks at quarterback, contractually, age-wise, otherwise, but it's an ownership group that has shown at least competence, right, over 15 years.
Yes.
And facilities are amazing and better than Jacksonville, but you got to figure out the most important position. I would choose Vikings and just gamble that I could figure out quarterback for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. But there might be some people, coaches and GMs, that say, I want Trevor Lawrence to be the one that I'm hitching my career to.
GM-wise, I would prefer, just as an example of two jobs that came open today, I would prefer the Vikings job to the Bears job because, one, I think the Vikings are a more functional franchise, but two, unless I think that Justin Fields is great, I've got the opportunity to chart my own path here. Mm-hmm. So like if I'm confident that I can find that guy, and I think, Justin's okay, but he's not great, but I can find my guy.
Yeah.
I prefer to step into this and have that ability as opposed to, well, we've got Fields and he should be the guy. So,
well, think about this too. The Vikings with Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer really weren't in a position where they could say, let's take a project quarterback in the first round because we have confidence. We know we can develop and get the most out of him, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Ravens got the most out of Joe Flacco, then they got the most out of Lamar Jackson. Like that's a franchise with complete quarterback developmental confidence and reference points. The Vikings have a lot of scars, right? Christian Ponder, and maybe it didn't matter what organization he was with, he was just going to fail. And Bridgewater blew his knee out. You never really saw that come to fruition. But it would be nice if the GM and the coach combination could have enough knowledge about developing quarterbacks and what it takes and maximizing that position where you could draft a Malik Willis and say, all right, he's raw. We definitely have to rein him in and get him to play a style of football that's going to fit better and be, better for longevity. But we know that we can get Malik Willis to his 90th percentile. Kellen Mond might be a bust, but he stood no chance with Mike Zimmer and Clint Kubiak as the ones that were developing him, quote unquote, developing him, right?
Correct.
So anyhow, all right, Judd, your first statement.
All right, my statement is this. I will go to the Bible for this statement. And no, I'm not going to turn to religion as a whole. Be not afraid. Be not afraid of change, Vikings fans. Be not afraid of what you thought that you had, which was a good but not great team. Because you know what? Being good is no way to live. Being great, that is a way. I saw the 87 World Series champion Twins. I saw 91, and I'm going to tell you right now, there's nothing like celebrating a ship, I believe the kids still call it. There is nothing like celebrating a World Series, Super Bowl, Stanley Cup, Larry O'Brien trophy, and we're going to hear today from some, Rick and Mike are gone. That's good. But can the Wolves find the guys to replace them? And Rick did a pretty good, look at Stephon Diggs. He found Stephon Diggs. And then of course the talk is going to turn to, Kirk Cousins and veterans. And well, if they're gone, what happens next? I'll tell you what happens next. The new management team and coach pursue a championship. That's what happens next. And yes, your favorite players in the whole wide world might be gone, but you know what? That's how you get to excellence. And so it doesn't help for Rick and Mike to say, well, we've been here so long with Harrison Smith. We can't. I mean, Anthony Barr. Anthony Barr is the poster child for what happens when you get too invested in a human. Sports is not about humans. It's about humans.
Well, you're wrong about that.
Wait. Sports is about humans who are also great at what they do and realizing when that greatness has deteriorated. So there's a combination. This is why these jobs are so tough. You have to manage people and read personalities. But here's what makes it really tough. When the athlete in that person starts to go off the table, and this is not saying that they change as people, you still love them. You have to make really tough decisions, which is Anthony Barr is a great guy. Like Mike Zimmer loves him. It looks like a son, which is awesome. They will be friends for the rest of Mike's life. But the reality is, long ago, Mike should have said, Anthony, no, it doesn't work anymore. I'm sorry.
Well, that's the GM's job.
Right, but I'm just saying
but it looked like Mike loved Barr, and so they had a problem with him. I mean, he was with the Jets, and yes, that's Rick's job too. But my point is, sports is if it becomes too much about the people and how much you like the people, you run into a real problem when it comes to players. Yeah, there's got to be a little separation of church and state there, right? But I would argue Mike's affinity and love for Anthony Barr wasn't a problem. The problem was Rick needs to look at it objectively from his seat and say it's not worth the money. He doesn't have we already have a star linebacker. I mean, how many star linebackers do you need? Like, we got to fill some other positions here. And it should have happened 3 years ago. They should have said, hey, once he signed with the Jets or agreed with the Jets, like it's the end of an era with Anthony Barr. Let's take that cap money, fix the offense. Like, that's the GM's job to stand firm and not just cave in and cater to the coach.
But Mike has to say, okay, I see what you're doing.
But here's what I would say about Zimmer. His relationship and affinity and love for Anthony Barr was not a problem. In fact, I think he should have looked to build that relationship and affinity and love for more players on the team, specifically offensive players. He made no effort for the first 3 years to get to know and build a relationship with his starting quarterback. He just looked at offensive players with disdain, right? He just
after Teddy he did.
Yeah.
After Teddy went down, man, that changed him. But what I don't get is this. So many coaches around this league for so long have worked so hard to be like, how can I be like Bill? I want to be Bill Belichick, right? And I'm going to copy this and copy that. You know what one of his greatest attributes is? One of his greatest attributes is to get the most from players and then cut them. That's one of his greatest attributes. Like, that's what you should have done with Barr. That's what you should be potentially, Phil, on the course. And I know this sounds harsh, but to do with Kendricks. Kendricks had a down year. Why? Because if he's at the end, like if he can't sustain, he's got to go. So like what Belichick, and what does Bill do? He lets you go. And then when a team signs you to a big contract and it's like, oh, this guy really has gone off the cliff and releases him, Bill re-signs you for cheap. Like, that is as harsh as you can possibly get. It's genius.
Yeah, there's a lot of Ring of Honor players on this roster that are over the age of 30 and not the same guy they were 5 years ago, who make a lot of money, like top
Correct.
6 cap hits on the team, and someone's going to come in and have to make some tough decisions. Speaking of tough decisions, so I know Declan disagrees with me on this. So I'll say my piece, and then I'm curious to hear Declan's rebuttal. But I think there is a next to 0% chance that Kirk Cousins is the starting quarterback for the Vikings in 2022. Now that Spielman and Zimmer are both gone. Now, Zimmer never wanted him to begin with, but I'm saying a new GM and a new coach are going to come in here. And there's a pretty decent chance it's going to be a first-time GM and a first-time coach, and you're not guaranteed a second time. So this is, and even for like a second-time coach, second-time GM, like you never know. This might be your last shot in the NFL. Kirk's going to be 34 years old this offseason. He is the definition of a good, not great quarterback with, to me, checkmate flaws in his leadership game, in his improvisational game, overcoming when things get muddy, right? Like, why would a new GM and a new coach come in here and extend him for 2 or 3 more years? You have to do something with the $45 million cap hit. So if there was a way where you could like use him as a stopgap quarterback for 1 year, I think they would choose that option, but it's almost unworkable at $45 million if you want to be anywhere near competitive next season. So you have to do something with that contract. Your choices are trade it or extend it. And I just don't think there's any chance a new GM and a new coach is going to say, all right, first order of business, let's attach the next 3 years of our careers to 34-year-old Kirk Cousins, because we think, despite all the evidence for 7 years around him, that he is the hidden gem solution waiting to be unleashed if we can get everything else right around him. I think he is a common denominator for good, not great. And I think a new GM, new coach is going to say, you know what? I don't want to deal with it. Let's start with our own guy. Let's get cheaper or let's get better or both. So that's my thought.
Yeah, all good points. My statement would be, don't make the assumption that Kirk Cousins is gone. I would not make the assumption yet that Kirk Cousins is indeed gone. Sage Rosenfeld's put out a nice tweet about an hour ago and said Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman are not the reason the Vikings have been consistently average for the last 4 years. That's clearly a shot at the quarterback. Kirk is flawed. He's not worth his dollar amount. He is at the 8th best quarterback in the league when he usually sits in between 12 and 14. I get that. But he's a veteran, established quarterback who has weapons around here. You're going to plug in a new offensive coordinator. You're going to plug in a new quarterback. You have a new head coach. You have a new GM. I understand that someone's going to come in here and survey that situation. And to Phil's point, you only get one shot to do that. So do you want to hitch that wagon to Kirk? I don't know. But I think it's a dangerous assumption to right now just to assume that Kirk Cousins is indeed written off as the quarterback of the Vikings. If the new GM and coach come in here and evaluate things and say, you know what? We got to get rid of him, I'll defer to them. I will. But I think I think we're jumping a little bit ahead of ourselves to assume that he is indeed gone with both Spielman and Zimmer being fired today on Black Monday.
Joe, do you want to break the tie here?
I think that the Wilfs want him gone. I think the Wilfs are... I don't think that the Wilfs fired Rick, who signed Kirk, and Mike, who was very much responsible for his own undoing, but also didn't work well with Kirk. I don't think that they did those two things this morning to keep Kirk. I think the wheels have been set in motion for Kirk to be gone. And I will say this as my next statement. Retool, not rebuild. Our expectations for 2022 probably go down now because it's like, okay, you're going to bring in a new GM and coach, and they're going to go in their own direction. But I don't think that there's going to be a feeling of, okay, now it's going to take 3-4 years. That's not how this league works, and I don't think that's how the Wilfs are going to work. And I think this roster has some very nice components left. And so I believe what this is going to be is a retool, not a rebuild. What do I mean exactly? Well, at the quarterback position, my guess is Cousins gets traded. And I will say this, and I guess this aligns me with the Kirk stands and the Cousins Crusaders. I don't think this is, well, who are you going to trade him to? You can't, he can't be traded. Nobody wants him. This is a quarterback starved league. And Kirk, he's a good steak, man. He's a good steak. He's not ground meat.
He's a good steak if you haven't had a steak in a while and you're just desperate to eat a steak.
Yeah, but exactly. It's a little chewy, but you're fine with that.
It's been 8 years, yeah.
Yeah, and so Kirk Cousins can be traded, and I think he can be traded in a fairly decent package, and that could mean that the new staff looks for a quarterback immediately. It also could mean that they don't, and that they attempt to get draft picks in a Cousins trade, that they go with a stopgap short-term fix at quarterback and then try and make a trade in the 2023 draft, which might be a better quarterback draft than this one is, and trade up. We talked about that on Purple Daily. The fact is, how often did Rick trade up, especially in the first round? The last time I checked, that's allowed. And so if you have a GM who trades up to potentially get a quarterback because you won 8 games, that's fine too. So I think this is going to be deemed as a retooling, not a rebuilding. And I don't think there's any thought within the Vikings now, and especially the Wilfs, that this is going to go down to like a 4-win team. I don't. Now, could that happen? Yes, absolutely. But do I think that's the expectation? No, absolutely not.
Dex, give us one more Viking statement here, and then we'll get to our friend, noted enthusiastic Vikings fan, Randy Vikes 69.
I will applaud the Wilfs for saying we want to contend for championships. That's what I love to hear. I absolutely love to hear that. They could have easily made this a fluff PR thing. Oh, we thank you so much, Mike and Rick. Oh, you guys did such good work in the community. And to be honest, my sports dad, I think, will really appreciate this. If you sign up to work in this business, I'm sorry, this is it. It's a cutthroat business, man. Like, if you get fired and families are affected, yeah, that stinks. But you're in the limelight. You're in the spotlight. So families are going to always be affected by this. The goal is to contend and win for championships, not to please family members, okay? That's the goal of the football team. And they want to contend for championships. I love that. I applaud that. Good for the Wilfs for saying, if Rick Spielman doesn't want to take a different job status, then goodbye. I don't want to deal with you. Zimmer, thank you. But also, we need to contend for championships. It ain't working. Yeah. Bravo to the Wilfs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people pointing out on Twitter that the ownership statement looks a lot like the Purple Daily statement.
Or are we getting that? Because that's absolutely accurate.
We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die. It's pretty much what they said. They just took like 3 paragraphs to say it, right?
But they talked about contending for, contending for championships, right?
Mm-hmm. So doesn't it feel good to say that, Wilfs? Wilfs?
WILFS.
I'm still pushing for Wilfs. A pack of
you
Wilfs.
want the pack of Wilfs, yeah.
Multiple Wilf.
I want to hear what our buddy has to say.
I do too. Yeah, he like I said on Purple Daily, he DM'd me and said he's working on a special stable. So I don't know what that means, but let's take a moment here, pause, and we'll bring our friend Randy in Cottage Grove, Randy Vike 69 on the show, Mackie and Judd.